A new report from the Department of Agriculture shows that an estimated 17 million households reported having problems finding enough food in 2022, a sharp jump from 2021 when boosted government aid helped ease the pandemic-induced economic shutdown. Wouldn't you know it, we gave people more money, more resources, and they didn't go and spend it on an Xbox, and they didn't go and spend it on drugs. They spent it on food that they needed for their family, on resources that they needed for their family. And now that we've taken away some of that aid that we boosted during the pandemic, and I mean, we, and I say we, I mean the government, I mean Congress, people are suffering at a higher rate than they were during that time. And AP News reported that using a representative survey sample of roughly 32,000 American households, the report said 12.8% or 17 million households reported occasional problems affording enough food in 2022, up from 10.2% or 13.5 million households in 2021 and 10.5% or 13.8 million households in 2020. And if we look deeper into those households, we'll additionally find that more than 44.2 million Americans lived in households that struggled with hunger in 2022, an increase of 10.3 million over the previous year. And I have some more here, but I have to say, any number would be unacceptable when we live in the richest country in the world. 44.2 million Americans. One would be unacceptable. 1 million. We're at 44.2 million Americans struggling with hunger. I had to contain my rage for a moment so I can give you more of the rage-inducing facts from this study. The number of households reporting more serious forms of economic hardship also increased. Wednesday's report by the USDA's Economic Research Service also tracks families with very low food security, a condition it defines as families having to ration food consumption and where, quote, normal eating patterns were disrupted at times during the year because of limited resources. I need to remind you that some of the people experiencing that are children. So even when conservatives bring the argument that, well, you would have food to eat if you were more successful in your work life, if you made more money, because to them, poverty is a moral failing. But that argument falls short when we're talking about children going hungry. We'll talk more about their heinous views on school lunches and school lunch debt as well in a minute. But these households experiencing this level of hardship in 2022 rose to 5.1% or 6.8 million households. A reminder, that's very low food security. And it's up from 3.8% in 2021 and 3.9% in 2022, a sizable increase. Now, the rising cost of living coupled with inflation and the gradual expiration of pandemic era federal assistance was reported to be the root cause of this problem facing families in America. A little more from AP. Increased benefits and more relaxed enrollment rules for SNAP, Foundational Government Assistance Program, commonly known as food stamps, didn't end until early this year, but a host of other federal and state level pandemic aid initiatives wound down last year, despite them being extremely popular. And just a few of those programs were the child tax credit expansion that provided historic support to families with children over the pandemic, lifted millions of children out of poverty. Let that expire. The universal free school lunches for all students, they let that expire in the summer of 2022. Now, inflation was also at the highest it's been in a while. This year, there's been some improvement, but it's still above average, and a little more on that. In September, the consumer price index increased 3.7% from 12 months earlier, same rate as in August. The latest reading is a significant improvement on the COVID pandemic era peak of 9.1% in June 2022, the highest rate since November of 1981. Now, economists say that it's going to take a while for inflation to return to normal and stable levels. The Fed is aiming for a 2% annual inflation rate over the long term, and they don't expect that to happen until at least 2026. Now, White House spokesman Jeremy Edwards said this in a statement: 17 million households experiencing food insecurity in the richest nation in the world is unacceptable, and exactly why President Biden has continued to call on Congress to fund programs like WIC, as well as SNAP, the National School Lunch Program, and restore the enhanced child tax credit that helped cut child poverty in half and helped millions of families afford the basics. Well, if he cared so much about it, I would have liked to have heard more from him while they were allowing it to expire. But I'm happy to hear that someone in the administration is speaking up for him and calling attention to this abject failure that we can't just blame on the Republicans. The Democrats failed to do these things. They failed to reauthorize these extremely popular and successful programs. But now, of course, Congress is not acting on these. We have a Republican controlled House of Representatives. And just take a look at how the GOP treats school lunch programs.
Hunger is a relative term, Mr. President. You know, I had a cereal bar for breakfast. I guess I'm hungry now.
Yes, I can understand kids going hungry, but is that really the problem of the school district? Is that the problem of the state of North Dakota?
I'm still a no vote on this because this is again a personal responsibility issue and not a starvation issue.
And David, we're listening to elected officials say, well, it's not my responsibility to make sure that children don't go hungry. That's a moral failing on their parents' fault, and they should suffer. It is despicable.
Well, and these are also, I think, self-proclaimed Christians who are saying this. And last time I checked, Christianity said, no, you should feed the poor and help the hungry. The fact of the matter is, I think the enhanced child tax credit, a lot of senators, a lot of members of the House knew this was going to expire at the end of September. And there was an effort by Elizabeth Warren, by Bernie Sanders, by the progressives. Hey, we got to reintroduce this. They could not even bring it to the floor for a vote in the Senate. They couldn't bring it to the floor in the House. And this is simple stuff. And again, we know what works. We have seen that the enhanced child tax credit, as you pointed out, cut poverty in half. We know that the universal pre-K and the universal food issues for kids helps them and also makes it easier for them to learn in school. This is not brain surgery, and these programs are not that expensive. So it just seems, to me, it just seems like it's cruelty. It's just, for whatever reason, Republicans are like, oh no, personal responsibility, you gotta be like a Christian. Oh, you're not very Christian.
No, they're not. What would Jesus do? He wouldn't do what they're doing. The cost benefit analysis, even if you want to look at it through that lens versus the moral lens, it is quite a benefit that has a ripple effect for that child, for that community, and for our nation if children are not going to bed hungry. And I know we always pull out children because we're hoping that people of good consciousness would have an extra burden on their heart of caring. But this is the same as the mass shooting of children. Not caring that millions of children go to bed either underfed or just plain out, flat out hungry, undernourished or not nourished at all, doesn't move the needle. But you know what? If we declare war on it, it would get funded. That's what we need to do. We need to put it in the war category. You know, the US Treasury Secretary with a bold face about 2 weeks ago said, oh yeah, we can afford 2 wars. So we can afford 2 wars in the United States of America, but we can't afford the enhanced child tax credit. We can't afford universal breakfast and lunch programs. We can't afford to cancel student debt. We can't afford, universal health care, on and on. We can fill in the blank. It makes absolutely no sense. And it is cruel in every single way. When the Democrats had control, and yes, the Republicans, the party of family values. They don't value anybody's family because if they did, they should be the biggest champions of these programs. But I digress. When the Democrats had control of both chambers, they couldn't even pass an increase in the federal minimum wage. They trotted out the parliamentarian and blamed her, even though they could fire the parliamentarian. They had no fiduciary obligation, no legal obligation to listen to the parliamentarian. So this is all games as far as I'm concerned. And the statement by that press person, all games. So the president urges Congress to do something about it. Ray, you made a very good point. Then where the hell was he when Congress wasn't passing these things? Where was the outrage there? There was none. So these are the kinds of things that you say when it's close to election time. And the American people, I don't think, are gonna buy it. They sick and tired of the games. And what this is going to do is gonna depress turnout. About 40% of the American people who were surveyed about can they make their housing payments, for example, almost 40% of them said that they miss meals just to try to make ends meet to pay for their housing costs. But again, we got money for war. I need somebody to make it make sense for me. I need people to be outraged about the suffering of people in this country. And guess what? If you have children who cannot eat, that means that their parents cannot eat. So these things go together. You can't separate children from their caregivers. Everybody needs to be able to eat.
And all I could picture while you were making those excellent points was Kyrsten Sinema going up to vote for the minimum wage, doing this.
And that curtsy.
The little curtsy tells you everything you need to know about how these people feel about poverty and how they feel about their constituents. Just a big.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.